Picture this. A fighter jet screaming across the ocean at 500 miles per hour. No landing gear. Fuel running out. Enemy interceptors closing in. And at the controls, a pilot everyone said was too soft for combat. What happened next defied every rule in the book and became legend in the halls of Top Gun. This is the true story of Lieutenant Commander Elena Ramirez, and the day she proved that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about flying straight into your fear and coming out the other side. But before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Lieutenant Commander Elena Ramirez had always been fighting two battles, one in the cockpit and one in the ready room. She was a graduate of the Naval Flight Training Command at Pensacola, top of her class, with reflexes that could thread a needle at Mach 2. Her instructors called her flying poetry in motion. But in 2019, the whispers followed her everywhere she went. Great pilot, they'd say, but can she handle the real thing? Her commanding officer, Captain Morrison, had put it more bluntly during her last performance review. Ramirez, you're technically perfect, but combat isn't about perfect. It's about pressure, and I'm not sure you're built for that kind of pressure. Those words stung because Elena knew what he really meant. She'd heard it her whole career, the subtle suggestions that maybe she belonged in transport aircraft or training squadrons, anything but the front lines. So when the assignment came down for Operation Desert Shield, a strike package over the Indian Ocean targeting terrorist training camps, Elena wasn't surprised to find herself listed as reserve pilot. She'd fly if someone got sick. Otherwise, she'd watch from the carrier deck. But on the 15th of March, Lieutenant Commander Jackson came down with food poisoning. Suddenly, Elena was suiting up for her first real combat mission. As she walked to her FA-18 Super Hornet that morning, she could feel the eyes on her, some supportive, others skeptical. Her crew chief, Petty Officer Martinez, helped her with her helmet. "You ready for this, ma'am?" he asked. Elena looked at the sleek gray fighter in front of her, 32,000 pounds of American engineering, loaded with enough firepower to level a city block. "Ready as I'll ever be, Martinez." But neither of them knew that in 6 hours, she'd be fighting for her life 22,000 feet above the Indian Ocean. The mission started perfectly. 4 Super Hornets launched from the USS Theodore Roosevelt at 0800 hours. Elena was flying as number 4 in the formation, the tail end Charlie. Her call sign was Scholar, a reference to her engineering degree from MIT. The target was a compound 400 miles inland, where intelligence suggested a high-value terrorist leader was meeting with his lieutenants. The plan was simple: get in, drop the ordnance, get out. 12 minutes over target, then home for lunch. Elena's Hornet carried 2 2,000-pound Joint Direct Attack Munitions JDAMs, along with air-to-air missiles for protection. Total weight: 44,000 pounds of aircraft screaming through the sky at 520 knots. The strike went flawlessly. All 4 aircraft delivered their payloads on target. Secondary explosions lit up the compound like the 4th of July. Intel later confirmed they'd eliminated not just the target, but his entire command structure. But it was on the way home that everything went to hell. Elena was cruising at 22,000 feet, 320 nautical miles from the carrier, when she felt a subtle vibration through the stick. At first, she thought it might be turbulence. But fighter pilots learned to trust their instincts, and something felt wrong. She glanced at her hydraulic pressure gauges. The left system was reading normal, but there was something about the way the needle was sitting that bothered her. She tapped the glass with her gloved finger. The needle dropped to 0. "Oh shit," she whispered. In a fighter jet, hydraulic fluid is like blood in your veins. It powers everything: flight controls, landing gear, weapon systems. Lose your hydraulics, and you're essentially flying a very expensive brick. Elena keyed her radio. "Viper lead, this is Scholar. I'm showing a left hydraulic failure." The voice of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the flight leader, came back immediately. "Copy, Scholar. What's your status?" Elena ran through her emergency checklist, her fingers dancing across switches and circuit breakers. The backup hydraulic system kicked in, but she could feel the aircraft becoming sluggish in her hands. Backup system is online, but I'm getting caution lights across the board. Landing gear shows unsafe. I think the whole system is compromised. There was a pause. Then Chen's voice, calm but concerned. Scholar, you need to consider punching out. You're 300 miles from home plate with a crippled bird. Elena looked at her altitude 22,000 feet. Plenty of room to eject safely. The ejection seat would fire her clear of the aircraft, her parachute would deploy, and the rescue helicopters would fish her out of the ocean within hours. It was the smart play, the safe play. But as she reached for the ejection handle, something made her stop. What stopped Elena wasn't fear, it was anger. All those years of being told she couldn't handle pressure, all those assignments she'd been passed over for, all those conversations that ended with, maybe next time. She keyed her radio again. Viper lead, I'm staying with the aircraft. I can fly this thing home. Scholar, that's not advisable. You have no way to verify your landing gear status, and I've got manual backup systems. Elena interrupted. I can get the gear down manually if I need to. I'm not abandoning a $60 million aircraft because of a hydraulic leak. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't about the money. It was about proving something to herself, to her squadron, to everyone who'd ever doubted her. Chen's voice came back, and Elena could hear the concern. Scholar, I'm ordering you to eject. That's a direct order. Elena's finger hovered over the radio transmit button. In the military, you don't disobey direct orders. But something in her gut told her she could bring this bird home. Viper lead, I'm declaring an emergency. As pilot in command, I'm exercising my authority to remain with the aircraft. It was a legal gray area, but technically correct. In an emergency, the pilot in command had the authority to make life or death decisions. The radio went quiet for a long moment. Then Chen's voice resigned. Copy, Scholar. We'll escort you home. But if that bird gets squirrely, you punch out immediately. That's not a request. Roger that, lead. Elena checked her fuel state enough for maybe 45 minutes of flight time. The carrier was 40 minutes away at cruising speed. It would be close, but manageable. But the Indian Ocean had other plans. Elena's radar warning receiver suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, and a computerized voice filled her headset. Warning! Warning! Missile launch! Missile launch! 2 enemy fighters had been vectored to intercept the American strike package, and they were coming in fast. Chen's voice crackled over the radio. Bandits, 2 o'clock high, 20 miles. All aircraft, defensive spread. Scholar, you need to get out of here. But Elena looked at her damaged aircraft, her fuel state, and made a calculation that would have impressed her MIT professors. Negative, lead. I'm staying with the formation. Because sometimes, the most dangerous place is also the safest place. And Elena Ramirez was about to prove that in the most spectacular way possible. The 2 enemy MiG-29 came in like wolves hunting a wounded deer. Elena could see them on her radar display, 2 bright green dots climbing toward the American formation at over 1,000 miles per hour. Her aircraft was damaged, low on fuel, and handling like a truck with a flat tire. In any reasonable scenario, she should have been running for home. Instead, she did something that would be studied in fighter tactics courses for years to come. Viper lead, this is Scholar. I'm going high. Scholar. Negative. Your aircraft is compromised. You cannot. But Elena was already pulling back on the stick, her Super Hornet clawing for altitude despite the hydraulic problems. The aircraft shuddered and groaned, but it climbed. What Elena had realized was that her damaged aircraft actually gave her an advantage. With her landing gear stuck in the up position and her flaps inoperative, she was essentially flying a sleek missile. Less drag meant more speed, and more speed meant energy. And in air-to-air combat, energy is life. She climbed to 28,000 feet and waited. The MiG were focusing on the other 3 Hornets in the formation, probably assuming the damaged aircraft would be running for safety. They were wrong. Elena rolled, inverted, and pulled the nose down, diving like a hawk toward the enemy fighters. Her airspeed climbed rapidly, 550 knots, 600, 650. The damaged hydraulic system made the controls heavy, but she muscled the aircraft through the dive. The lead MiG pilot never saw her coming. Elena's heads-up display painted a perfect targeting solution as she closed from above and behind. The enemy fighter filled her windscreen, its blue-gray camouflage stark against the ocean below. "Fox 2, she called, squeezing the trigger. The AIM-9 Sidewinder missile streaked away from her aircraft, its infrared seeker locked onto the MiG's hot exhaust. 2 seconds later, the enemy fighter disappeared in a ball of orange flame. The second MiG pilot, seeing his wingman destroyed, immediately broke off his attack on the other Hornets and turned toward Elena. But she was ready for him. What happened next was a classic merged two fighters turning toward each other at a combined closing speed of over 1,200 miles per hour. In 3 seconds, they would pass each other, and whoever had the better position would win. Elena's damaged aircraft was sluggish in the turn, but she had something the MiG pilot didn't: altitude advantage and superior training. As the two aircraft flashed past each other, she pulled her nose up and rolled, using her remaining energy to climb above the enemy fighter. The MiG pilot tried to follow, but his aircraft couldn't match the climb rate of the Super Hornet. Elena rolled inverted again and pulled the nose down, bringing her aircraft behind the enemy fighter in a classic 6 o'clock position. The MiG pilot, realizing he was in trouble, tried to dive away, but Elena was already there, her targeting system locked on. "Fox 2, she called again. The second missile found its mark, and the MiG disintegrated in a shower of debris. Elena pulled out of her dive and looked around. The sky was clear except for the 3 other Hornets in her formation. She keyed her radio. "Viper lead, this is Scholar. Bandits are down, area is clear." Chen's voice came back, filled with something that might have been awe. "Scholar, how the hell did you do that with a damaged aircraft?" Elena looked at her fuel gauge and felt her stomach drop. The dogfight had burned through her remaining fuel reserves. She had maybe 20 minutes of flight time left, and the carrier was still 25 minutes away. "Lead," she said quietly. "I think I'm in trouble." The mathematics were simple and terrifying. Elena had 1,800 pounds of fuel remaining. Her damaged Super Hornet was burning fuel at 180 pounds per minute. That gave her exactly 10 minutes of flight time. The USS Theodore Roosevelt was 22 minutes away. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen's voice was calm but urgent. "Scholar, you need to shut down one engine. Immediately." Elena's hands moved to the engine controls. Shutting down one of her 2 turbofan engines would cut her fuel consumption in half, but it would also reduce her speed and leave her with barely enough power to maintain altitude. "Shutting down engine 2, she reported, pulling the throttle back and watching one of her 2 engines wind down to silence. The aircraft immediately became sluggish, like a race car suddenly pulling a trailer, but the fuel flow dropped to 90 pounds per minute. Now she had maybe 20 minutes of flight time. It would be close, very close. "Scholar, this is Roosevelt Control. We're turning into the wind for emergency recovery. Deck is cleared. Emergency equipment is standing by." Elena could see the carrier in the distance, a gray speck on the endless blue of the Indian Ocean. But as she got closer, she realized she had a bigger problem than just fuel. "Roosevelt Control, this is Scholar. I need to confirm I have no landing gear. Repeat, landing gear is stuck up and locked. I cannot get it down." There was a long pause from the ship. Then, "Scholar, say again your landing gear status." "Control, I have no main landing gear, no nose gear, no tailhook. I'm essentially flying a 30,000-pound glider." Another pause. Much longer this time. "Scholar, recommend you eject within gliding distance of the ship. We'll pick you up." Elena looked at the carrier, now just 10 miles away. She could see the deck clearly, 815 feet of floating runway, with arresting cables stretched across it to catch landing aircraft. But those cables were designed for aircraft with tailhooks, and she didn't have a tailhook. "Control, request permission to attempt a barrier landing." The barrier system was a last resort option, a huge net stretched across the deck to catch aircraft that couldn't engage the arresting cables. It was designed for emergencies exactly like this one. But no one had ever attempted a barrier landing in a Super Hornet without landing gear. Scholar, that's not advisable. The impact forces control. I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking for the deck. Elena lined up with the carrier's landing area, her single remaining engine at maximum power. She had one chance to get this right. The approach speed for a normal Super Hornet landing was 145 knots. But without landing gear, Elena had to come in much faster, almost 200 knots, to maintain control. At 200 knots, she would hit the deck like a meteor. Elena's approach was a thing of beauty and terror. She came in low over the water, her aircraft's belly just 50 feet above the waves. The single engine howled at maximum power as she fought to maintain airspeed and altitude. The carrier's deck rushed toward her 815 feet of gray steel that suddenly looked very, very small. Scholar, you're looking good. The landing signal officer called over the radio. Hold your glide path. Don't let the nose drop. Elena could see the barrier net stretched across the deck, a web of steel cables designed to catch her 30,000-pound aircraft. If she came in too high, she'd fly over it. Too low, and she'd hit the back of the ship. She had about a 2-foot margin for error. At 100 feet above the deck, she pulled the throttle back. The engine wound down, and the aircraft began to settle toward the carrier. 50 feet. 20 feet. 10 feet. Elena pulled back on the stick, flaring the nose up to soften the impact. The Super Hornet's belly touched the steel deck at 180 knots, sending up a shower of sparks that lit up the flight deck like a welding shop. The aircraft hit the barrier net dead center. The cables stretched, groaned, and held. In 3 seconds, 30,000 pounds of fighter jet went from 180 knots to 0. The impact was tremendous. Elena felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Her helmet slammed forward, then back. Every rivet in the aircraft screamed in protest. But when the sparks cleared and the dust settled, the Super Hornet was sitting on the deck in one piece. The canopy popped open, and Elena climbed out on shaking legs. She pulled off her helmet and looked around at the deck crew, who were staring at her in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire flight deck was erupting in cheers. Elena Ramirez was awarded the Navy Cross for her actions that day, the second highest decoration for valor in the U.S. military. But more importantly, she earned something that can't be pinned to a uniform: respect. Her new call sign became Brick, because when everything else broke, she held it together. The investigation later revealed that her decision to stay with the formation and engage the enemy fighters had saved the lives of her squadron mates. Her impossible landing preserved a $60 million aircraft and its classified systems. But perhaps most significantly, Elena Ramirez proved something that day that resonated far beyond the flight deck of the Theodore Roosevelt. She proved that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. Today, Lieutenant Commander Elena Brick Ramirez is an instructor at the Navy's elite Top Gun School, where she teaches the next generation of fighter pilots. And when her students ask her about pressure, about combat, about what it takes to succeed when everything is falling apart, she tells them this: it's not about being perfect, it's about being present. And when the moment comes, when everything is on the line, you don't think, you just fly.